Good morning, friends and enemies, and welcome into Rankings Week. Each day this week, I will be going through a different position, starting today with the top 30 running back rankings for 2026 fantasy football. These are for PPR leagues, so you can adjust accordingly. Each player will be thrown into their own tier as well. Because we'll be talking about nearly 30 individual players, I'm going to give a quick elevator pitch, the upside and the downside for every player, and move along quickly. As always, timestamps are down below, but if you stay tuned to the end of the video, we will be ripping off some NFL trivia at the end. It will be fun. So for the ball knowers that want to stick around, again, timestamps are down below for each player in every section of the video. If you are new here, we will be doing the exact same thing for wide receivers and then quarterbacks, tight ends together in a video later this week. So subscribe here if you want to see those. So starting at the very top, the elite RB1 tier. These are guys that I think should be just relatively going in the first round. And as we go down these players, what you'll see on the screen, similar to a lot of the weekly rankings that I was doing last year throughout the season, it has their Vegas odds, their season-long props going into the year. So jahmyr Gibbs' rushing lines at 1,200.5 yards, rushing touchdowns, receiving yards, total touchdowns, etc., as well as their strength of schedule, which we can click on and kind of just jump into at any points. So strength of schedule on the left side is for their entire season long for running backs. And then the right number is their playoff strength of schedule. So just weeks 15, 16, and 17. So tier number one, the elite RB1, you have jahmyr Gibbs as my RB1, Bijan Robinson, and Christian McCaffrey. For jahmyr Gibbs, there's very, very little downside case here. They get rid of Devon Montgomery. He's a guy who goes for nearly 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, year in and year out. I would say the biggest downside to Gibbs is like their offensive line does not play as well. They don't have the pieces that they had over the last half decade to consider them an elite offensive line, but he's such a good playmaker. Not worried whatsoever. I just think the small sample we've seen with him on the field without Devon Montgomery has been so league breaking that don't really want to pass that up. He has a great strength of schedule as well in the playoffs. Minnesota's tough, but they get the Giants and they get Chicago Bears in your semis and your championship. So we love a little jahmyr Gibbs here. Bijan Robinson, the RB2, coming off of a 2,300 yard from scrimmage season, only 11 touchdowns. So I think he's got a lot of room to grow there. Offensive line still pretty good. Biggest question mark here is the quarterback situation. I think Tua probably goes into the year as a starter. And we saw what Tua did with devon, achane in terms of checking down and seeing those PPR numbers just absolutely destroy the league. So I think we could see a similar situation with Bijan Robinson, maybe 1,000 season. Realistically, they just got Bijan Robinson and Drake London there as pass catching weapons. End of story, period. Nobody else catches passes in that offense. So both of those guys are worthy of the one-on-one. If you wanted to go in either direction, have no problem with it. Christian McCaffrey, my RB3 here in the elite RB1s. I mean, we just saw him have a top 10 fantasy season of all time for fantasy running backs in just his previous season. When I look at the weapons around there, like even if his efficiency has dipped a little bit in terms of rushing and like yards per carry and the breakaway plays, the receiving floor is just so insanely high that I imagine he's going to catch 4, 5, 6, 7 passes per game. George Kittle coming back from the Achilles. Juwan Jennings no longer there. Ricky P is always a liability to get hurt. They just don't have many proven weapons that are healthy in that offense right now. So I think C-Mac probably starts out the gate catching an insane amount of passes. And I should know at any time, any of these tools, any of this information is available right now in our fantasy membership on bdge.co. The draft guide will also be a part of that package. If you are a member, for any player that you're looking in the rankings, you can simply click on them and it shows basically all of their information in one teeny tiny little package for you. So you got the Vegas props, you got any team data that you want, team total wins, offensive line ranked. You could look at their strength of schedule. It's incredibly useful when you're on the clock drafting in your drafts. It's got the team additions in terms of who's in, who's out on the team, fantasy relevance wise. So anything that you can need to make your decision on the clock, it's all in our draft guide in our fantasy membership on bdge.co. So moving on to tier number 2, these are guys that I feel good with as my running back 1. So I'm not looking at them as like league breaking players, but if I leave my draft and they're the guy that's the top of the depth chart for me on my fantasy team as my RB1, I still feel relatively good with that. That is James Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Ashton, Jeanty, Chase Brown, and Derrick Henry. So James Cook has just been a beast the last 2 seasons, scoring touchdowns left and right. This is the first season last year in which they finally allowed him to like really take control of that workhorse role, had over 300 carries for the first time in his career, and he was incredible with it. The upside case you can make for James Cook here, I think, is that their new offensive coordinator, you could see Pete Carmichael, former Denver senior offensive assistant, was also with the Saints with Sean Payton for like 15 years prior to that. If you look at like a running back pass friendly scheme from any head coach in the history of the NFL. I don't know if there's a better one than what Sean Payton has done. So Pete Carmichael learning from Sean Payton. James Cook's a very good receiver, and it pains me that they don't use him in a high volume role like that. So I think the upside case comes in the form of James Cook doing what he does rushing wise year in and year out, but catching 50, 60, 65 passes and being a top 2-3 running back in fantasy this year. Moving to Jonathan Taylor, the RB5. I don't think I need to make a huge case for him. We saw what he could do last year, but he also really struggled when Daniel Jones was out, and Daniel Jones is recovering from his Achilles tear. So I think Jonathan Taylor will be a very, very high floor, high volume back this year. I think naturally some of the explosive plays will probably regress quite a bit. So I don't think JT will be, in the contending runner of offensive player of the year like he was last year, but I still think if you end up leaving your draft and he's your RB1, you'll be fine building that team. Saquon's a guy that I'm investing in for a bounce back season going into this year. I think most of the struggles last year were just toxic environment between AJ Brown and that bullshit and Kevin Patullo, their offensive coordinator, just being one of the woats, and he is no longer there. So having any new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia is going to be a huge win by subtraction for the entire offense. So I'm expecting a bounce back for Saquon Barkley. I think their offensive line was just absolutely decimated with injuries last year. They won't be elite like 2024, but I am expecting a bounce back for Saquon Barkley, and I think he's going to see a ton of volume in an offense that's going to be very, very run heavy. And I imagine he's going to be the centerpiece of the offense. So Saquon, I'm very okay having back in on as my RB1. Same thing with Ashton Jeanty here. I just think he struggled as a rookie, still ended up finishing with a relatively strong season, saw over 70 targets. And the biggest upside case for Jeanty, of course, is you bring in Clint Kubiak as the head coach. You get Kolton Miller back, one of the best tackles in the NFL who missed a lot of time with injury last year. And then you sign Tyler Linderbaum to a fat contract this offseason to really retool the interior of the offensive line. Jeanty obviously had zero running room in 2025 as a rookie. I expect that to be a huge change this year with a new progressive scheme under Clint Kubiak and a retooled offensive line and hopefully better quarterback play with Kirk Cousins for a few games, but the number one overall pick in Fernando Mendoza coming in as the quarterback there. Probably sooner instead of later. Jeanty, to me, is a 3-down player. Saw the highest opportunity share of any running back in the entire NFL last year. Still finished his rookie year with, I think it was like 1,400 yards from scrimmage, 10 total touchdowns. So that was a miserable year. You give him the same opportunity share, which I don't see why he wouldn't. Better scheme, better offensive line. The upside case for Ashton Jeanty is incredibly, incredibly real here. And what Chase Brown has done over the last 2 years is also incredibly real here. He's been nothing but be the workhorse in a high volume offense for Cincinnati. 2 years in a row, he's been a great fantasy running back. There have been basically zero changes to the offense, except for feels like the energy is pretty good in Cincinnati right now, where at this point in the summer, there's usually some bullshit going on between Joe Burrow being hurt, between contract holdouts, between Jamar Chase or T. Higgins being hurt. There's always something going on. This is the first time it feels like in a long time that we haven't had any of that stuff for Cincinnati. So if the Bengals went out and signed, some sort of real pass catching back or drafted someone in round 3 or round 4, or even round 5, maybe I'd have a slight hesitation. But I just think you are now attaching a guy who they've shown to be the workhorse, who was crazy good over the second half of last year. Really outside of the first 3-4 games, he was great for fantasy in 2025. So Chase Brown's a guy I think a lot of people are just going to overthink. But if you wipe away your subjective feelings about it and just say, okay, this is a workhorse who's only competing with Samaje fucking Perine for touches in what's projected to be one of the best offenses in the NFL, I think you could do no wrong. King Henry typically does no wrong in fantasy football if you end up drafting him. He's coming in as my RB9. I don't really think he lost a step last year. What I think happened was the Baltimore offense lost a step because Lamar Jackson was badly banged up. The hamstring injury clearly hampered him. When you look at Lamar Jackson's rushing totals over the last 6-7 years since he's been in the NFL, it's been 130 carries, 140 carries, 155 carries, 127 carries, and last year it was 65. There was a very, very clear difference in last year versus every other year prior to that. And to me, I'm willing to wipe away most of Baltimore's troubles on offense to Lamar Jackson being injured. I am interested to see what the new offense looks like. They no longer have Todd Monken, obviously a huge coaching change there in Baltimore, and they do lose Tyler Linderbaum, so maybe their offensive line takes a step back. They did use their first round pick on an interior offensive lineman, so just kind of replacing him with a little bit of youth. But once again, zero competition for Derrick Henry. Keaton Mitchell is now in Los Angeles, so you have Derrick Henry here kind of by himself doing his thing. Very good offense. This is a team with a team win total of 11.5 wins. Like, give me the guy who's going to be on a very good team that's going to score a shit ton of touchdowns. You can see their strength of schedule is phenomenal as well. A Cleveland Myles Garrett-less defense in week 16, and then Cincinnati in week 17. So love the fantasy playoff schedule for Derrick Henry as well. Moving to tier number 3. This is what I'm calling the Boderline RB1, RB2. If I go into the year with them as my RB1, I think I'm going to have a little bit of skepticism about my team, but obviously rather have them as RB2s, but you could do worse. Overall, I think there's upside cases for all these guys. I think there's downside cases for all these guys as well. And this tier consists of 8 players: Kenneth Walker, Omarion Hampton, devon, achane, Jeremiyah Love, Josh Jacobs, Javonte Williams, Cam Skattebo, and Kyren Williams. Kenneth Walker signs a fat new deal with Kansas City to be their premier featured workhorse running back. I don't think they have real competition behind him. Will he lose some snaps on, clear passing downs? For sure. But I think Patrick Mahomes is recovering from the serious knee injury, the ACL tear. So I think they want to lean on a guy like Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker has always been able to put together like small sample sizes of elite play at running back. And I think he's going to have every opportunity to be a dude who just blasts off this year. I think about like Kareem Hunt's rookie season under Andy Reid when he led the league in rushing yards with, I think it was like 1,300, 1,350 or something like that. I think Kenneth Walker has a real chance to lead the NFL in rushing yards this year. And even an uninspiring team that the Chiefs have kind of become in recent years, like they still have a 10.5 win total here and 6 primetime games. So the NFL's got no hesitation about the Kansas City Chiefs being a good team. Give me the goal line guy. Give me the really, really explosive guy in the backfield that just has not seen anything close to this level of explosiveness in a very, very long time. Next up, we got Omarion Hampton, who upside case here. Offensive line is extremely healthy again. Joe Walt coming back, Rashawn Slater coming back. They use a second-round pick on Jake Slaughter. They signed Tyler Biadasz. So their offensive line went from a liability last year to probably a top 12, top 10 unit. I think Herbert should be awesome. He threw the ball a lot to Omarion Hampton when he was playing last year. Mike McDaniel comes over as the OC, who has just fed running backs in terms of fantasy points. Yes, he'll be battling a little bit with Keaton Mitchell, Kamani Vidal, but I think those players get scraps. Those players get very situational snaps on the field, where Omarion Hampton is going to be what's projected to be a very, very good offense with a new offensive coordinator who obviously knows how to score points in this league. So another one where I think people are probably going to overthink Omarion Hampton again. If you think the Chargers are going to be good, then you should just be drafting Omarion Hampton because he's going to be able to piggyback on the success. He is obviously going to be the goal line back there. He's a 3-down guy, first round draft capital, extremely explosive, 220 pounds, can catch the ball. Like, not much this guy cannot do. So when people are taking small sample sizes of what his rushing efficiency might have looked like when he was and or wasn't injured last year, it's just not something I am totally interested in. And the next player on this list who I will probably get the most pushback from will be devon achane. He's my RB12. So still an RB1. I was all in on devon achane last year. Ended up being a phenomenal pick. I am pulling the reins back, and it's probably nothing that you haven't heard from people in the industry pulling back on devon achane. I've made a video already about this. He was like in the thumbnail. It's 10 guys I think that I will have very, very few shares of on any of my fantasy teams. We will link that video down below if you want to go check that out afterwards. Devon achane is one of them. They did resign him, but like the offensive system and just Miami's team in general going into 2026 is probably the worst environment in the NFL. I think their offensive line has the ability to actually be okay, but you have no offensive playmakers. Like, they're going to have so much trouble moving the ball. You have Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator. I think Malik Willis coming in as a quarterback. It's a mobile quarterback. So you go from Tua, who is like a check down king, to Malik Willis, who is going to scramble a ton. So this is not an offense I think is going to be able to sustain drives. They have no actual playmakers of note. I think like Greg Dulcich is probably the odds-on favorite to lead the team in targets outside of achane. So yeah, he'll obviously have his explosive games. He's devon achane. He's a fucking phenomenal running back, underrated in between the tackles, can pop off for 30 fantasy points on any given week. He can take a swing pass to the cribbo, and I think you'll still have those high ceiling games. But in terms of consistency and in terms of what we saw from last year, I think we're probably in for, unfortunately, a bit of a down year for devon achane, despite how talented he is. Same thing with Jeremiyah Love. I mean, picked as a top 5 guy in the NFL draft this year, goes to Arizona. Not a great offensive system there. Not an envious position for him to be in. They signed Tyler Algier this offseason. Not a great offensive line. They brought back James Conner. They still have Trey Benson. Maybe not for long, but it's a messy backfield. I do think Jeremiyah Love probably has a pretty high floor because he has obvious 3-down ability. Draft capital is crazy. Very, very good pass catcher. Explosive as well. And I made a video last week. I can't even remember what the topic was, but I talked about Jeremiyah Love, and I went back and looked at all of the running backs that were drafted inside the top 10 and where they finished in overall PPR ranks during their rookie season, you'd have to go back to, it was CJ Spiller, to find a top 10 drafted running back in the NFL draft that didn't finish as an RB1 PPR in their rookie season. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because like if you drafted Bijan in the rookie year, obviously price matters here. If you drafted Bijan in the rookie year, like he was RB, I think 16 or 17 in points per game, but overall, all of them finished as RB1s in terms of the length of the season and staying healthy, which I don't think is maybe a coincidence, because when you're drafting a guy top 10, normally they are workhorse size, speed, they have all those things going for them. So not crazy that they stayed healthy for it. But I think Jeremiyah Love with the Arizona Cardinals, they're not a team that's going to win a lot. I could see them, they're obviously not going to pass as many times as they did last year. They'll probably still have a very, very high pass rate. I think he'll be taken out in obvious goal line situations. He'll probably need high target volume. I think he'll need some explosive plays in order to be like a really good fantasy pick. But I like the floor for Jeremiyah Love if he's going to drop to like the 2-3 turn in fantasy drafts. Next up, we got Josh Jacobs. Kind of in just like wait and see mode on Josh Jacobs. He's got off-field stuff. He's got some injuries that he's battled in each of the last couple of years just because of his running style. But I think if things like continue to be relatively positive from here on out for the rest of the summer, I will continue to move Josh Jacobs up. To me, he reminds me a little bit of like a lot of these guys over the last few years, which we'll talk about in a little bit, where like it's Omarion Hampton right now, Javonte Williams, Kyren Williams, where it's like it's easy to overthink these players because they're kind of like the boring picks. But at the end of the day, when you're sitting there on a fucking Sunday and the Packers are on TV, it's like, yeah, I want their starting running back. They're just like a good offense that scores a lot. LaFleur uses Josh Jacobs on the goal line to an insane degree. You could see that his rushing touchdown Vegas prop is at 11.5. There are almost no running backs outside of Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry who are sniffing that number. So he's a dude who just basically scores weekly, and they just don't really have other running backs that they want to hand the ball to. Like Emmanuel Wilson is now in Seattle. So Jacobs, again, like, yeah, if he's healthy, if the off the field issues don't lead to some sort of suspension, Jacobs is like a very boring 3rd, 4th round pick that you're going to be really glad is just kind of sitting in your RB2 slot on a weekly basis. And I think you could say the same thing with Javonte Williams, where he cooled down towards the second half of last year, but they added nothing in terms of backfield competition to Dallas. So I expect another very high volume year for Javonte Williams, especially early down. That goal line role is going to be beautiful in the Dallas Cowboys offense, a team that's projected to score the 3rd most points in the NFL in this upcoming season. It's like maybe Jadon Blue gets it together this year, but maybe he just fucking doesn't. And Javonte Williams plays 80% of the snaps once again. Like Blue showed us 0 last year. So I'm not going to go as far as giving him the benefit of the doubt that like, yeah, he's going to play this big pass catching 3rd down role here. I think they were pretty damn comfortable with Javonte Williams, and he's a pretty good pass blocker. So wouldn't be surprised if Javonte again ends up being a really boring pick in the 3rd, 4th round turn that again, you're going to be really happy he's just sitting there in your RB2 spot. Now, this is the end of tier number 3, where I'll probably get the most pushback of rankings, where I have Cam Skattebo as my RB16, Kyren Williams as my RB17. So Scat, I've talked a lot about in previous videos already, so I won't go too deep into it. Scat's coming back from the crazy ankle injury. However, we just interviewed Dr. Jesse Morse, sports physician, as well as just kind of keeping your eye on reports out of Giants camp. And everything has been like blossomingly positive out there for Cam Skattebo's recovery. So I'm going to choose to believe those timelines right now. Apparently he's going to be full go for training camp. If that's not the case, if they're like, oh no, we're resting him every other day, if there's even like a slight hinge of hesitation there, then maybe we pull back the reins. But I haven't heard a single thing that is negative towards Cam Skattebo. And the first 8 games of last year, the only 8 games that he played last year, he saw 9 of 9 goal line carries, every single carry inside the 5-yard line, 23 of 26 red zone carries, and saw about 67% of the running back targets in that backfield. He was a bell cow to the highest degree. Yes, there is a little bit of a coaching shift here, so maybe they look to Tyrone Tracy in different downs, but I still think Cam Skattebo is going to play 65 to 70% of the snaps here, and that is such a valuable role behind a mobile quarterback like Jackson Dart. They also use a top 10 pick on an offensive line, so hopefully they're better. As you can see, their strength of schedule is really, really good this year. Cleveland, Detroit, Dallas is a wonderful run schedule in the fantasy playoffs as well. So love Cam. Kyren Williams, another guy, it's hard to make the case against Kyren Williams. He's just been so good and proved everybody wrong year after year after year. I do think there was material change to the offense last year. And by that, I mean, like, it did start to become a drive-by-drive split between Kyren and Blake Corum. There have been previous seasons when Sean McVay has come out and be like, oh, we want to get these guys more involved. We want to get them more involved. And then it never happens. But last year, we actually saw the change happen. And there was a report that came out from Nate Atkins. He covers the Rams for The Athletic, so he's a very respected reporter, and said that he would not be surprised if Blake Corum runs for 1,000 yards this year. And at first you're like, okay, that's just, that's just coach speak, or that's just random speak from a guy who's probably not like tapped into stats in the nerdy way that we are. But I will say there have only been a handful of running back duos that have both run for 1,000 yards in a given season. And the Rams this year, it's obviously a long shot bet to happen. But if they're splitting drives, and I do think Kyren plays on the valuable downs, like he is a much better third down back. He's a very good pass blocker. He's also a much better pass catcher than Blake Corum. On the goal line, I do think, if it's like do or die, we have to give it to one guy. It probably goes to Kyren over Blake Corum. But I think the way that they play the game, to me, it's going to come down on a drive-by-drive basis. Are you on the field? Is Blake Corum the one on the field for the drive in which they get to the goal line? So I think Blake Corum has a good of chance to score, 6-7 touchdowns as anybody else that's a backup running back in the league. But I remember going into last year, Kyren Williams' touchdown line was insanely high. I think only Derrick Henry had a higher one than him last year. I think his rushing touchdown Vegas prop was 11.5 or 12.5. Very, very high, which I get because the Rams offense is so good. They're so efficient. And going back to the duo, in order for, I think, Blake to hit 1,000 rushing yards, he'll need to have a very efficient season. I went back, it's like the D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewarts of the world. It's the Brandon Jacobs and Derek Ward. Those duos were averaging like 5+ yards per carry. I think the Rams offense is so efficient. Sean McVay is so smart. Their defense is so good that they'll have the tempo of the game to kind of dictate however they want the game to go. And I'd imagine more often than not, like you do want to have a very successful ground game. So if Blake Corum averages 4.8, 4.9 yards per carry, he really only needs 210 carries, which over the course of the season is, 12, 13-ish carries a game, which I don't think is crazy. So again, long shot. Obviously, if you're betting on it, the betting odds of two guys in the backfield hitting 1,000 yards, very long shot, but I actually don't think it's as crazy as you make it sound. So Kyren Williams, like at the end of the day, great offense, a good role, but I do think it needs to be acknowledged that, again, when you're sitting there on Sunday, you're going to have full drives when Kyren Williams is just not on the field. So the upside for Kyren Williams doesn't really exist in the way that it does for other guys on this list that will likely be the 3-down bell cow. And that's why I have him as RB17. Happy to have him as my RB2, but don't think we're going to see the Kyren Williams of previous years. Moving on to tier number 4. These are flat out guys that I think need to be RB2s on your team. If you are banking on them being your RB1, you will likely be in trouble. It's Breece Hall, it's Quinshon Judkins, it's Travis Etienne Jr., it is Bucky Irving, and it is DeAndre Swift. I should also say, I mentioned that you can sign up for our membership to get access to all of these numbers, and you can, but you can get access to 3 months of the fantasy membership for an incredibly discounted price. Actually, the entire website membership for an incredibly discounted price if you are in a state that's eligible for BetMGM and you are a new user on the app or the website. All you've got to do is deposit and place a slip of $10 or more. And when you do so, when you're a new user, when you first get on there, use code BDGE. Do that, place a slip. As soon as you do, they're going to send you an in-app message in their app or on their website with a code to use on our site, bdge.co, which will unlock 3 months free. And at this point, that means you'll get the entire draft guide because that carries over. It's July, so July, August, September, all of September. So you'll get our sit start tool, all the stuff that we've been working on that we did content around last year. These tools will now fully be available for you to use. Vegas props every single week. Obviously, our rankings. There's some cool like weather API integrations that we're pushing this year. Just like a bunch of incredible tools that you guys will personally be able to use this year. So go to BetMGM if you're a new user, $10 slip, use code BDGE when you first get on there, and they're going to give you a promo code, 3 months free of everything on our website. So we've got Breece Hall re-signed to a big deal. Should be the workhorse there in New York. That, of course, is where the hesitation comes in. It is New York. They should have a good offensive line, but Aaron Glenn is still there. We saw him want to use a committee. I will say I'm more in on Breece Hall this year than I was last year, and I think I would take Breece Hall over like a Garrett Wilson. They got Geno Smith coming in, so maybe some more stability at the quarterback position. I mean, it can't get worse than it was last year, but I'm just always hesitant to bet on, the Jets running back right now. His rushing total is 5.5 in terms of touchdowns, so that's always a little bit spooky. They just don't get inside the 5-yard line very often, and something I say very often is normally a player's rushing touchdown total is dictated by team success. Outside of like the ends of the spectrum of guys who just hit like breakaway home runs all the time, the Gibbs, the Taylors of the world, 99% of running backs fall into the category of if you're in a very good offense, your rushing touchdown line is going to be a lot higher just because you're a product of your offense being inside the 5-yard line more often. And I don't know that we're going to get that with the Jets. I will say not having Justin Fields there anymore, not taking away like rushing touchdowns in that sense could be a good thing for Breece Hall. So I'm like hesitantly optimistic about Breece Hall. I'm not going to be someone overdrafting him in my drafts, but if he falls to me and I can get him as my RB2, like won't be terribly upset about it. Quinshon Judkins, awesome rookie year before fracturing his ankle, had some ligament damage as well. So he's kind of recovering from the same thing Skattebo has been. I haven't heard too much about Judkins. They've been like relatively optimistic about him, but we'll have to wait and see because of the extra ligament damage. Overall, the concern for anyone in Cleveland is just that offense. Like the offensive line was awful last year. Their quarterback play is going to be probably awful regardless of who is under center. Probably not going to have a big third down role there. That'll likely be Dylan Sampson. So Judkins, really easy to like the player, really difficult to like the situation there. Travis Etienne, would love to be much higher on him, but to be honest, it seems like Alvin Kamara's got something to prove here. He attended OTAs for like the first time in forever, and it seems like Alvin Kamara is not done with the NFL. Like Kamara's skill set at this point, he's not the same runner he was when he was younger, obviously, but he can be an incredible third down player. He can be an incredible just passing down role, and I think that will eat into Travis Etienne's upside, obviously. I do like the Saints' offensive line this year, grabbing David Edwards from Buffalo. They obviously invested into the offensive line in Kelvin Banks last year. Their offense overall, Tyler Shuck looked good as a rookie. They drafted Jordan Tyson top 10. Kellen Moore is always a guy who runs a very, very high-paced, high-volume offense. And of course, their strength of schedule, as you can see, is phenomenal. It is crispy. They're playing in a dome. They're playing in the NFC South. Like on paper, the Saints for fantasy have a beautiful run out. And had Alvin Kamara like retired, I might have Travis Etienne as like a borderline top 10, if not like top 8 fantasy running back this year. They did give him a fat contract, which tells you they're going to use him in a very high degree. But I will say, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Alvin Kamara is a dude this year in fantasy. So that's my hesitation with him. Kind of a similar hesitation with Bucky Irving. Last year, his entire story was injuries, foot, shoulder. Had shoulder surgery in the offseason this year, but not overly concerned about him as it pertains to his week 1 status. What I am concerned about is they let Rachaad White walk, but they ended up signing Kenneth Gainwell to a 2-year, $14 million deal, and Rachaad White got $2 million. So like they could have just re-signed him and let him play the same role, but they clearly went out and wanted to get an active part of their passing game in that backfield. Sean Tucker was also a massive part of the goal line situation for the Bucs last year. Like Bucky Irving played 10 games last year. He appeared in 10 games, had 0 goal line carries. Sean Tucker had 9. So I'm worried that while Bucky Irving's a good player, and I expect this offense to bounce back a bit, you know, Baker was hurt, Abuka was hurt, Evans was hurt, Godwin's coming back from an injury, Tristan Wirfs missed a quarter of the season. I think Bucky can be good as an early down runner, but you have Kenneth Gainwell playing clear passing downs and you have Sean Tucker mixing in on the goal line. It's hard to get like the projections to be really high on Bucky Irving. Right after him, we've got DeAndre Swift, just attached to a very good offense in Ben Johnson. We saw what DeAndre Swift did last year. He's just a perennial RB2, high floor, similar to Kyren, though. Him and Kyle Monangai, DeAndre Swift, are just going to split series kind of back and forth. Swift's a better pass catcher, most likely. And this is an offense that should relatively be, you know, high scoring and be inside the 10, 5-yard line. They love to use the running backs down there. So would be surprised if Swift doesn't score between 7 and 10 touchdowns this year. But the drive-by-drive thing makes it a little scary. I will also say the offensive line that was just dominant last year. Ozzie Trapillo tore his Achilles at the end of the season, or ruptured his Achilles, I believe. Likely going to miss most of, if not all of this year. He's their starting left tackle. And then Drew Dahlman, their awesome center that they signed from the Falcons last year, great run blocking center, retired as well, just a year after his 3-year contract was signed. So I do think we'll see a little bit of regression with the dominance that the offensive line showed in the run game for Chicago last year, but just being attached to Ben Johnson in year 2 of this scheme with Caleb Williams, year 2 of Ben Johnson, like the uptick in offensive efficiency overall should probably give Swift a runway lane to be an RB2. And we will move down to the very last tier of the video. Again, we will be doing the same thing for wide receivers, another point in this week. So subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hit the button that looks like this, the thumbs up if you enjoyed. So I know you like these videos. So we'll move on to the strong flex tier. And that'll take us from running back 23 to 29. All right, I lied. It's 29, not 30 running backs in this one. We've got David Montgomery, Bhayshul Tuten, Tony Pollard, Treveyon Henderson, Jaylen Warren, Jadarian Price, and Rhamondre Stevenson. Now, I think the name of this tier is warranted for about half these guys, and there's a couple guys that I think are thrown in here for upside cases. So I think David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Jaylen Warren, and probably Rhamondre Stevenson makes sense as a strong flex play. I think they have a volume floor in their respective offenses. Like David Montgomery moves over to Houston. I have a little trepidation with just that offense overall. I think they're going to be so defensive minded. And yes, D-Mont might end up with like 250 carries, but I don't know. Like it's not going to be a high scoring offense. I'm not a believer in like a huge Stroud bounce back year. So I like D-Mont. I think it comes down to whether or not you think Houston's offense is going to be high powered, which I don't. They still have Woody Marks there and he's much better in a complementary role. So I'm hesitant on David Montgomery. I do have him as RB23, but like, again, this is why I think tiers are important and they'll be available in my rankings, where to me, I'm looking at him as a strong flex, not like an RB2 that I want in my lineup there. So he's ranked inside the top 24 running backs as an RB2, but I think tiers more so tell the story of like where you actually feel comfortable with them in your lineup. Bhayshul Tuten, I think, has crazy upside in a Jacksonville offense that was awesome last year. 20 running back scores. Obviously, Travis Etienne is gone. They do sign Chris Rodriguez, but he's been dealing with some sort of random foot injury for the entirety of the summer so far. Tuten's explosive. He's young. He showed out relatively well in his rookie season. So I think he's got crazy upside to be a high upside guy in a very, very good offense here. They use the screen game phenomenally with the running backs. So I think we can see a lot of that with Tuten. So I like him here. Pollard, kind of same story, year in and year out, 1,000-yard rusher, should be the workhorse for the most part in Tennessee. It's just a matter of can the offense take that jump into the next tier under Cam Ward. They're doing a lot to make sure that they do. Brian Daboll's coming in. They've got Carnell Tate as a top 5 pick, brought in Wan'Dale Robinson. So they're giving them the opportunity to. And obviously, if the Titans offense, floats up and gets to that next tier, I also think that will obviously, raise the tide of a guy like Tony Pollard. You got Treveyon Henderson coming in this year. I'm a little hesitant on Treveyon Henderson. I don't think he played very well last year outside of the couple games in which Rhamondre was out and he was able to take that workhorse role. Overall, I think like he was worse than Rhamondre as an in between the tackles runner. He was not a good pass blocker. I think you need to get him 10, 12 touches a game. Get him out in space as much as you can. My biggest hesitation is the schedule is going to be much harder this year than it was last year. And mainly it's just Josh McDaniel being there. Like he's been the offensive coordinator or the head coach for many teams at this point in his NFL career and has almost always used a running back by committee. And we saw that to a very heavy degree last year. And I just don't think they're going to want to change that going into this year between Rhamondre and Treveyon Henderson. I have Rhamondre ranked as RB29. He's below Henderson because obviously I think the upside case is very clear to Treveyon Henderson. Very explosive coming into year 2. Of course, he can improve as a pass blocker. Of course, he can improve as an in-between the tackles runner. They used a first-round pick on an offensive lineman again, so probably a better offensive line. They also signed Elijah Vera Tucker from the Jets, who's always hurt, but if he can stay healthy, that will improve the interior pretty tremendously. And then you're also just attached to Drake May, who in his second year was the runner-up for MVP and took his team to the Super Bowl. So if Drake May is the next, tier of the Mahomes, the Josh Allens is, like you're typically going to want a running back that's explosive and young attached to those guys. Then you've got Jaylen Warren in Pittsburgh as my RB27. I don't have a strong take on the Pittsburgh backfield, but I think I would just prefer Jaylen Warren to Rico Dowdle here. I think he will play more valuable downs. I think he'll be the pass catcher. I think him and Rico will probably split goal line work. With no more Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, we saw how serious that target share was for Kenneth Gainwell when Aaron Rodgers is under center. Obviously, he's returning. So with Jaylen Warren, I could see him catching 60 plus passes and scoring, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns or something like that. So sneaky like Jaylen Warren again, even though he's, being drafted pretty low here is like an RB3 flex play. And the last running back is Jadarian Price here, outside of Rhamondre, who we just talked about. But Jadarian Price comes in as my RB28. I just think the Seattle backfield is it's kind of all over the place now. We just had a report come out that says this backfield will definitely be some sort of split. They don't want to run Jadarian Price into the ground immediately. First round pick, but not top 10, top 12, top 15 capital, very end of the first round. George Holani, I think, is going to play a role in the passing down game. Emmanuel Wilson, they signed from Green Bay. Do they use him on the goal line? Jadarian Price has also never in his life seen a workhorse role, right? He was behind Jeremiyah Love at Notre Dame. It's also a smaller back, 203 pounds. So I think there are a lot of red flags here. The biggest upside case, of course, is that he's a first round running back and you don't want to dismiss that, but could see this being a committee. And then the bad part is, even though we're not high on Zach Charbonnet, and he probably doesn't look like himself at any point during 2026, recovering from a late ACL tear, like comes back week 10, week 12, probably takes, a 40% share of that backfield, probably takes it a decent amount of goal line work there. That's when fantasy season is on the line. That's when you're in the fantasy playoffs. And it's like, you got a guy in Jadarian Price who's like, a decent low-end RB2 for you all year. You add Zach Charbonnet into the mix for the last 4-6 weeks of the season, and he becomes kind of unplayable there. So if you are someone who's like obsessed with Jadarian Price's talent, I can understand why you want to buy in. They do also lose Clint Kubiak, their offensive coordinator, now the head coach in Las Vegas. So that's another like heavy concern for me. So worried about that overall. So I get it. If he ends up on my team, his ADP right now is RB26. Ivan's RB28. Not too down low. Like it's not like people are drafting him as a top 15, top 18 back. So relatively priced. I think all this risk about him probably won't be overdrafting him. But if he lands on my team, that's okay. I just hope he's not in my starting lineup. So that is my top 29 running backs. I did say 30, so I won't go into it, but I got J.K. Dobbins at RB30. I got Jonathan Brooks as RB31 right down below. And that'll do it for my running back rankings. But as promised, we're going to jump into some NFL trivia for y'all. All right, NFL trivia courtesy of BDG.co, of course. These are all daily games that are free to play for you guys. We'll start with the daily dart. If you guys have ever played 501, this is going to be a completely random category. I have no idea what it's going to be, but we have to get down today's starting score from 500 down to 0 based on the prompt here. So we're going from 500 down to 0. Today's challenge is receptions in a single season by Rams only. There's a handful of receivers that obviously come to mind very, very quickly. We'll take Cooper Kupp's big year in 2021, and you can't go over 0, otherwise you bust. So we got Kupp, 21, 145, knocks out a big chunk. Isaac Bruce in 95 is going to be a movie, 119. And then we can go, we could pick just a Torrey Holt year. Marshall Faulk, I believe, went over 100 catches. Was it 2000 or 99? I think they're both good. So we can go Holt, Faulk, and then like some combination of Robert Woods, even though those are probably going to take us over. So we need to pick 2 of them. I actually don't know what Torrey Holt's best year is. Let's go Faulk first. Let's go 2000. Ew, Nicholas. Torrey Holt. Let's go 01. All right, we got to lock in. A 74 catch season. Can we get one from this year? What about Devonte Adams? What did he have this year? Like 59 catches? That actually puts us in a pretty good spot. I think if I try to guess a random Robert Woods year, I'm going to end up busting most likely. I'm a moron. I didn't even think of Puka. Puka didn't even cross my mind this year. That's how sick I am. I'm a sicko. Again, all these games that we're going to play right now, free to play for you. There's a new category every single day. All you got to do is have a login on the site, which is free to have. You just got to put your email in. Let's go Devonte this year. He had 50 something, 60. All right, even better. So we got to get 14 catches in single seasons. My mind obviously immediately goes to running backs here. So like post Gurley era, pre Kyren era, we're talking about a mishmash of like Cam Akers, Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown. Ooh, Malcolm Brown feels kind of spicy. Who's like a thumper? Sony Michel feels like kind of good. Cam Akers, did I already say him? I'm going to go with the Sony Michel year. Am I going to be able to pick a right Rams year? So he was drafted in 2018 by the Pats. So he was definitely still there 2019. I feel like 2021 feels kind of good. Thoughts? Fuck. All right. So we had 21 that year. So we bust and we have one more pick left. Do we go Malcolm Brown? Do we try someone from this year? Who else was on the roster? We had, I can't remember who, Mumfield. He probably had more than 14. Tutu, I don't think caught a ball. We could go with one of the tight ends. Like Colby Parkinson probably had too many. Higbee might not be terrible. He missed a lot of the year. 14 feels low for Higbee. Maybe Davis Allen or Terrence Ferguson. Who do we feel better about? Davis Allen or Terrence Ferguson? Or Higbee? One of those 3 feel kind of good. Which one's it going to be? I think I'm going to go Terrence Ferguson. Did he really have 14 catches? That's so bad. Fuck it. Let's ball. 11. Let's go. That's a snipe. Top 10 possible answers. Yeah, Puka was sitting there. Okay, Torrey Holt 03 was the year we wanted. All right, whatever. We got down to 3. That's fine. Submit to the leaderboard. We keep your rating, basically your percentage away from 0 on a game-by-game basis. Let's see who else played. Alex Orgy, shout out. There's an Orgy in the end zone. Jerry from the Rays, Bengal played. So we're doing good on our end there. All right, next game up, we will play Imposter. This one's a fun one. All right, so it gives us a random category, random stat, and there's one guy on here who was not top 10. Wow, this is a tough one. There's just absolutely no chance we run this one. So it's NFC rushing yards in the year 1995. So 9 of these guys ranked inside the top 10. One of them was ranked from 11 to 20 that year. And we've got to click correct guesses until we get down to the final one. So Emmett's an obvious banger. Barry. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know all the names on this list. This is some unk trivia. And again, this is completely randomly generated every day. I have no idea what it is until we click on the actual game. Could be rushing yards, could be in a conference, could be the entire NFL, could be passing yards, could be a defensive stat, could be 1987, it could be 2025. Rodney Hampton, I feel good about. Terry Allen had a phenomenal year in 96. So here's my logic here. I know Terry Allen, I know Eric Rett, I know Garrison Hurst. So when we're going this far back in unk trivia, hitting names that you know feel pretty good. Terry Allen 96 was a movie, but having two Washington players on there makes me feel like the other Washington player is probably the imposter. But I also feel like I did a trivia recently where Terry Allen 95 was not good. I think he underwhelmed, and it might have been because he got hurt, which means maybe his backup came in and put up some numbies. So let's start with Eric Rett. Let's go Garrison Hurst. Okay, that was the number 9 player. I think I might just get it down to fucking the two Washington players and figure it out from there. If I pull this off, y'all all have to vend me $45. Edgar Bennett, never heard of him in my life. But this was a Brett Favre MVP season. So you got to imagine like their running game was probably pretty good, right? I'm gonna hit him. Let's go. All right. So we're down, and that was the number 10 guy. So whoever's left is the number 3 answer on the board, or 4. So it's very much more likely to be Terry Allen than Brian Mitchell. I think we're just going to stick with our gut here. Let's go. Like, none of y'all are ripping off the top 10 rushing leaders in 1995. Not a single fucking one of y'all. You're going to submit that to leaderboard. Who did they take off? Okay, Ricky Waters, better on that dope bike. That's fire. Mo. So Mo just doesn't play fucking 501 anymore. He's just tapped out on his skills. He went 9 for 9 though. We have a couple other ones. We're not going to do the daily grid today. It's probably going to take too long. Daily rip's a good one. So this is fantasy related. This is one of our money makers. Ooh. Okay. Has thrown at least 29 interceptions in a season. So basically you're building a fantasy lineup based on whatever the prompt is. You got to pick a specific year. So for quarterback, we have to pick a quarterback that has thrown at least 29 interceptions in a season. Peyton threw 28 his rookie year. Drew Brees had some monster INT seasons. I don't know if he got to 30 though. Jameis Winston obviously threw 30. Eli threw 30. So if you put a guess in that doesn't qualify, like if I tried Drew Brees and he only hit 28, then it would just be minus 25. You get to keep guessing. So it comes down to whether the fact of like, is Drew Brees worth going for? Like minus 25 is still better than the next best answer. There's someone else I'm like forgetting. Maybe Brett Favre. Did he have 30 in a season? That feels high. It'll show us the top 10 answers for each prompt afterwards. We'll rip this just to get through. I'll try Drew Brees first, and we'll take his 2011 season. Fire, didn't work. All right, we're just gonna. Is there anyone recently that was good that I can't think of? We'll just take Jameis in 2019. All right, 92% efficiency. So one of the top answers on the board. Jacksonville Jaguar, excluding Maurice Jones-Drew, Fred Taylor, and Travis Etienne. That's one of the most annoying fucking prompts I've ever seen. So immediately what comes to mind is Leonard Fournette and James Robinstein. I don't really remember who was doing it post Maurice Jones-Drew. It was some combination of like Toby Gerhart, TJ Yeldon. To keep things moving here, I feel like James Robinson was low-key better than Fournette, but Fournette had some pass-catching seasons. He was low-key ass in Jacksonville for fantasy though. Let's go James Robinstein, and we'll just hit 2020. All right, 97% were him. 3+ rushing touchdowns in a season for 3+ teams. So we need a running back that played for at least 3 teams, and clearly like the very last team they played for wasn't some bullshit stint. Can't use Adrian Peterson. I'm just looking at the logos of teams just to like refresh me of running backs here. Ricky Williams, where did he finish? Curtis Martin was New England, New York. Jamal Charles, C-Max played for 2 teams. Emmett was 2. I wonder if Le'Veon Bell gets there. He'd be there for Pittsburgh, obviously. He would be there for the Jets. Does he end up with 3 rushing scores in like Kansas City or Tampa Bay or anything like that? Or Baltimore? Nah, that feels risky. Arian Foster, we got Texans, Miami, probably no one. David Johnson would low-key be a movie. Arizona, Houston. I don't think he scored 3 rushing touchdowns for New Orleans. I don't think I have a lot of other great answers for this one. You have like Priest Holmes started with Baltimore, then he went Kansas City. Like, did he end up on a random team in his last year and score 3 touchdowns? Like, that would be a banger of an answer. I kind of want to try David Johnson. No, there's no way he ended up with 3 rushing touchdowns in a season for the Saints. I might end up taking some bricks here. I mean, there's like Melvin Gordon, Latavius Murray's like the journeyman type dudes, but we got to swing for upside, I think. I think I'm going to try Lev Bell. We'll take his sophomore season, 2014. Fuck. At this point, we're just going to get absolutely trounced. Might as well try David Johnson. I would actually put my mother's life that this is not going to hit. 2016. Fuck. Why is this prompt so hard? Who am I just forgetting? All right, I guess we'll just settle for Frank Gore then. Frank Gore, 06. That just can't be right. Frank Gore doesn't have 3+ rushing touchdowns in a season for 3 teams. That one I'm confirming. San Francisco. Wow, holy fuck. Okay, yeah, no. San Francisco, he did it a bunch. Indy, he did it. And then in Miami, he had 0. Buffalo, he had 2. New York, he had 2. I was about to put our own system on blast right there. Why is this low-key the hardest prompt of all time? Clinton Porter, is Denver to Washington? Did he end somewhere else? I think I'm just going to have to take a fucking Melvin Gordon year or something. I think I accidentally paused the video. I don't know what happened, but we're on this prompt if we haven't gotten here yet. And I've already bricked like multiple times on this. All right. Try Jeremy Maclin, like Dwayne Bowe's. All right. Well, at least we know like Dwayne Bowe was on the team. Like big year 2010, so we'll just fucking go 2011, I guess. Just give us points or something. Okay. He's also just the number 1 answer. Maybe his big year. Nah, 228. Whatever. 10+ receiving touchdowns in a season for 2+ teams. Okay, so Devonta Adams comes to mind. DeAndre Hopkins comes to mind. I don't think Jerry ever. Oh, Randy Moss comes to mind for sure. Let's hit Randy. Fuck him up, Randy. 07 Randiesel. Top answer on the board. 10+ receiving touchdowns in a season for 3+ teams. Oh, I feel like Devontae's probably the only answer here, right? Raiders, Rams, Packers. 2020. All right, we're finishing strong here. We picked it up. 2004, excluding Muhsin Muhammad. People don't know this. Muhsin was going off in 04. Let's think. All right, so we got Randy. Randy's biggest years were 03 and 07 was probably fine. Oh, 04 might have been when he went to the Raiders, though. Could have been his last year in Minnesota. Peyton Manning had a massive season in 04, so Marv or Reggie Wayne both make sense here. When was Reggie a rookie? 01. Okay, that's kind of like peak Reggie. I like that a little bit. Joe Horn was good. Go with like a Jimmy Smith, Derrick May. I think I'm going to take... Oh, should I go Reggie or Marv? Still kind of feels like it's in Marv's wheelhouse here. I think I'm going to go Marv right now. All right, 95%. Let's see where we went wrong. Jameis, Brett Favre. Okay, I was right there. Should have went 95. Brett, Leonard Fournette. Okay, his 3rd year, not even his rookie year, was the best. DeMarco Murray, LaShawn McCoy. I'm so fucking stupid. And then Marv was topped by Torrey, Javon Walker, and Joe Horn. All right, we'll submit that to the leaderboard. We actually moved down in our rating. Hate to see that. But there you have it. Those were today's games, or if you're watching this, I'm filming this on July 6th, so maybe it goes up July 6th, maybe it goes up July 7th. Regardless, you guys can play these. These are new board, new trivia games for these every single day. Free to play. Just got to sign up with your email on bdge.co. Add your friends to your leaderboard so you can compete against them. I love y'all. Thank you for hanging out today. Smoochies.